Let's welcome in a former Penn State Nittany Lion, obviously spent a bunch of years in the NFL, was a co-leader in receiving touchdowns in the NFL for 1 year, also a Pro Bowler. And that, of course, is Allen Robinson, kind enough to join us on the Zach Gelb Show. Allen, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing this. How you been?
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
So if this goes down the way that we think this is going to go down, what's your reaction on Matt Campbell being the next head football coach at Penn State?
I'm excited. I've heard nothing but great things about Coach Campbell. Again, from guys like David Montgomery, Alan Lazard, guys that I've, spoke to, played against, and just kind of heard them in the media space speak about Coach Matt Campbell. I've heard nothing but great things, so I'm excited.
So obviously he's getting a bigger job, and obviously it's different being the head coach at Penn State than it is Iowa State. Since you played there and you know the university, what does Matt Campbell need to understand to succeed at Penn State?
I think everything that he's embodied at Iowa State, I think will translate to Penn State. He's a hard-nosed coach. I've heard him speak about his players. I've seen some post-game interviews as far as the locker room, the energy in there. I spoke to some former players who played for him, and just the way that they speak, he has to do nothing but continue to be himself. I'm excited. He's a guy who's coming from a program that probably had limited resources, now coming to Penn State to be able to continue to transcend who we are as a program.
Allen Robinson here with us, looking like Matt Campbell's going to be the next head football coach at Penn State. Just the last few weeks, it's been all over the place. Obviously, we knew after what was the Northwestern game that James Franklin was going to be continuing. I thought it was the right decision. Then the search got a little bit messy, but it looks like they're going to come out of this with a good hire that's going to be praised. Just how have you kind of reacted to really the last month where this was all over the place in the search?
It's been in true Penn State fashion as far as how they've gone about the process. I don't think that it's been anything that, for me, I haven't been too emotional or up in arms about the process. Again, I'm a guy who went to Penn State. My offer from Penn State came pretty late in the process itself. We then acquired, after Joe Paterno, Bill O'Brien. The first time we met Bill O'Brien as a team was in February after the Super Bowl, which, again, is pretty unprecedented as far as a new coach coming into college. Bill O'Brien left after New Year. So everything with Penn State, again, has kind of been on their timing. So it hasn't really taken me by surprise by any means. I think we've taken the time to then get our guy who's already been a head coach at a program, who's done some great things at that program. I mean, if you speak to people from Iowa State, they would say he's the best coach in the history of their program. So being able to acquire a guy like that, I think is pretty special.
I'll tell you, what I was shocked about this morning? I woke up and I go to the internet and it's like Pat Kraft talking to the team release, like bombshell report. And I go and I listen to it of 30 minutes and I thought it was a good, honest conversation between players and an AD, voicing their opinions, letting their voices be heard. And obviously, Pat was kind of, used some colorful language, whatever it is, what it is. I think he's just speaking to everyone and you let your guard down. I thought it was a little bit weak, though, that I'm assuming it was a player. I don't know, maybe it was a staffer. They would record that and then they would release that publicly. Have you seen any of that? And how did you respond to that just getting out?
We're in the time of media and social media where it's such a prevalent thing. So things getting out. I mean, even seeing with the Lane Kiffin situation, we saw stuff coming out from his team meetings and stuff like that. So that's going to happen. Like I said before, I always look back to times when I was a Penn State player and Joe Paterno was then, he had stepped down and so on and so forth. And the conversation that we had with the athletic director then, they weren't the greatest. It wasn't things that everybody wanted to hear, that everybody agreed upon. Those are in-house conversations. So when things like that get out, I don't think any other of it, but at the end of the day, Matt Campbell being the guy that we're looking to hire, being the person who's the front runner and in position to get the job, I feel great about that. If you had told me months ago that once we fired Franklin, that this is the coach that we would have ended up with, I would have been excited and thrilled about that.
So let's just say if one of these current players hits you up and they go, Allen, I want to just pick your brain here. We've been part of this push for Terry Smith. We didn't get Terry Smith. A lot of us said we would leave if it wasn't Terry Smith. Now we know it's not Terry, but it's looking like it's going to be Matt Campbell. What would you advise those players to do? Like, should they definitely stay at Penn State, or is it, hey, you go into the transfer portal and you try something else?
I think they definitely should stay. I know we're in the world of NIL where a lot of players get what they want. But, again, for me, being able to play in the era where you had to kind of be understanding of the circumstances and kind of take the circumstances for what they are. And again, at the end of the day, For the guys who don't want to play at Penn State, you aren't meant to be a Penn State player. For myself, I'm understanding this is one of the biggest conferences in college football. You're going to play against the best competitors and the best opponents. You're going to have nationally televised games. These are things, what more? I understand the NIL, but what more is there to ask for from a playing standpoint? When you look at, like I said before, playing against the Ohio States, against Oregon, nationally televised games, these are all the things that you want. And not to mention Beaver Stadium, playing in front of 110,000 people. There's not too much more that you can ask for from a player on the playing standpoint as far as college football.
And you have a pretty positive view about it. I know there was one player in the meeting that said, a lot of people don't commit to Penn State because of the area. Was that ever a big deal when you were in college just because there's not a lot to do in State College?
Once you get to State College, Pennsylvania, specifically Happy Valley, there's no place like it. Going to the spring game, seeing the game there, being around the energy and atmosphere in Happy Valley and State College, I haven't found an atmosphere like that since I've left.
All right, there you go. Allen Robinson here with us. So let's get to the NFL for a few things here. The Chicago Bears, man, that was a statement win on Black Friday, going into Philadelphia, playing the defending world champs and just running the ball down their throats. Just how about what Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, and company have been able to do, sitting there at 9-3, and if the season ended today, they would have a bye. They'd be the number one seed in the NFC.
I think Ben Johnson has done a phenomenal job. And me being with the Detroit Lions and Ben Johnson last season, I'm not surprised by any means. That's the way that he coached. He's a very detailed, fiery, competitive guy, meaning that he's going to challenge his guys each and every day and each and every week to be the best that they can be. He's going to challenge those guys to improve upon things that may be weaknesses in their game or in the offense. So I'm not surprised by any means. I'm continuously going to expect Ben Johnson to build upon where they're at right now and moving forward. I think that they've had a successful season this far. No matter what happens at the end of this year, I think they've had a successful year and a great year to be able to build upon moving forward.
Like you said, you were with the Lions. I know the season hasn't gone the way that they've envisioned it, but they did get a big win last night. The playoff push is back on. Are you still a believer, even without Ben Johnson there? No more Aaron Glenn, that Dan Campbell and company can get this thing right in Detroit?
I am, and I think they have it right. I think right now they're just going through a little bit of an injury bug as far as the guys that they have hurt. Obviously, we saw Terrion Arnold go on IR, which is one of their top corners. We saw Brian Branch, be confirmed today that he has an Achilles injury and will be missing the remaining part of the season. Kirby Joseph has been out as well. So it's a lot more of the injury aspect than it is Dan Campbell. I'm a firm believer in Dan Campbell and what he brings to the table. Even with losing Ben Johnson, he's created a competitive, physical culture of guys who want to go out and compete each and every week. And I think when you have that in the NFL, you put yourselves in a very great position each and every week to go out there and be competitive and try to win games.
What's your view on Jared Goff as a quarterback, just since you were able to play with him?
Man, I think Jared Goff is a phenomenal quarterback. And some people may look at some of the physical limitations, if you will, but I think the cerebral aspect of the game and what he does on that level takes them to another stratosphere from an offensive standpoint. When you look at from the time he's been there to now, the offensive ranks of where they're at, the development of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, when you see all those guys, that is also a reflection of the quarterback and him being able to get those guys in the ball and being able to get them the ball in very advantageous positions. I remember being there going into a week like Minnesota, playing against a Brian Flores, knowing the kind of defense and stuff that he's going to give you blitz-wise, and Jared Goff can handle 1, 2, 3, 4 plays sometimes at the line of scrimmage, being able to get guys into the right position.
All righty, I got to ask you about George Pickens. Didn't have a good night last night. Richard Sherman lays into him in the postgame. George Pickens in George Pickens fashion. He responded today with one crazy Instagram post, and it's since been deleted. What would your advice be to George Pickens? Because we know he has the talent, but sometimes it just seems like he's his own worst enemy.
My advice for George Pickens would be knowing where he's at right now and the ground that he's gained on being a top elite receiver in the league, and for him to just not regress at all with his mental aspect of the game. I think right now we saw probably the most good press that we've saw of George Pickens. And I think him being able to continue to build upon that going into free agency. And again, I don't want to say too much now because I'll probably reach out to George. These are personal conversations that kind of should be had because, again, I love to see the space that George has been in all season. And just for him to be able to show the world exactly who he is and the kind of talent that he has, but not to regress at all with being able to take some of the criticism, because at the end of the day, when they sing your praise, at some point in time, they may also sing your criticism as well. And him being able to handle both of those imposters the same.
What is he like in that locker room? Because you guys are in the same locker room together in 2023, right?
Man, he's a fun guy to be around. You know, me being a veteran and being around younger guys, you know, I have an understanding of, you know, how to kind of talk to those guys and some of the same things that they were dealing with. Him in Pittsburgh, again, dealing with different quarterbacks, different coordinators, it being a carousel kind of in both of those situations can be frustrating for a player. You know, I was a player in Jacksonville where at times it was frustrating for me. You know, we got rid of an OC that I had a very good year with to bring in another guy. So there are frustrations that can take place, but me being the veteran guy at that point in time, being able to understand where he's coming from and try to talk to him about that and kind of help him with that. You know, we definitely created a very good bond, you know, and he's a guy who's fun to be around, man. I would always joke with him and say that he kept me young in my years in Pittsburgh.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Allen Robinson, appreciate the time today. Thanks so much for the perspective, and you be well, all right?
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.